The day my parents handed me the keys to an old, rusting van and told me to leave, something in me that had been dulled for years finally snapped awake. I was 18, a boy who had spent his life carrying other people's dreams like a heavy, ill-fitting coat. For as long as I could remember, my days had been scheduled and measured: piano practice after school, science club on Wednesdays, extra tuition on Saturdays, endless mock exams. Their pride sat on my shoulders like an emblem, polished and cold, and every misstep meant shame, lectures, comparisons, even public humiliation in front of relatives. There was no room for me inside their version of success. When the university letter came back with my name crossed out, their faces transformed from proud to furious in an instant. The disappointment landed on me harder than failing the exam ever had. They accused me of wasting time and money, of ruining their reputation. My father's voice, the one I had always wanted to please, called me a failure. Their punishment was swift and surgical: pack your things, take the van, and never show your face here again. I didn't fight. There was nothing left to defend. I climbed into the van, closed the door, and felt the cool, terrifying air of freedom for the first time in my life. It was not joy at first, it was shock. A raw mixture of grief and relief, but there was space now. A blankness I could finally fill with my own breath. The first night I slept under the fluorescent glare of a 24-hour petrol station, curled in the driver's seat with a thin blanket and a notebook. I wrote until the ink ran low, sketches of faces I would never draw for my parents' galleries, little poems about the way the moon looked over the highway, plans for a life that had nothing to do with titles or reputation. In the mornings, I would loop through the city searching for food banks, laundry services, a safe place to park where the van wouldn't be towed. Pride was a stubborn companion. I hated accepting help, but people I met along the way taught me how to ask. A month into this uncertain life, the campground appeared like a promise. It wasn't on any map, just a stretch of scrubland beyond the last suburb, dotted with RVs and vans, strings of wind-worn flags, and a trail of smoke that smelled like someone's attempt at home. I parked the van at the edge and sat for a long time, watching a group of people gather around a fire. They were a patchwork of ages and stories: a retired teacher who'd left after a divorce, a mechanic who fixed satellite dishes, a couple renovating a VW camper to travel the coastline. They looked up as I approached with cautious, weathered curiosity, but it only took a few shared cigarettes and a hesitant confession for them to hand me a plate and a place by the flames. They were not saints, none of them were. They had flaws and bad tempers and complicated pasts, but they also had a way of making room in their lives for each other. Over the next weeks, we hiked into the hills, swam in a lake so cold it took my breath away, caught fish that tasted like victory, repaired engines by moonlight. I taught a teenager how to sketch faces with charcoal. In return, an elderly woman taught me to sew a torn sleeve back with quiet efficiency. We pooled money for groceries, shared tools, and held vigils when someone's partner didn't come home. For the first time, I felt seen not as an emblem of family prestige but as a person whose messy edges were welcome. Living with them stripped away the pretense my parents had spent years crafting around me. I discovered a stubborn hope inside myself, an urge to paint, to sit beneath a street lamp and draw the way light fell on trash bins and strangers' faces. Someone lent me a battered easel. Another sold me a set of paints for a few nights' shift at the communal van repair. Little by little, my days took shape around things I actually loved. My work was clumsy at first, but it had warmth. It held my breath. The one steady thread of family left was my grandmother. She had always been different, the soft voice in a house full of commands. While my parents saw me as a reflection, she saw me as a person. She called every week, often leaving messages full of encouragement. How is the art? Are you eating properly? She had a room that was always reserved for me, a cup that always waited on her kitchen table. She mailed care packages and sent cash quietly when my parents were strapped. I kept her at arm's length at first, ashamed to share the truth of my homelessness. My father had warned me, blunt and cold, not to tell her. He feared she'd take my side and cut them out of her will. So I lied, small lies meant to protect her from worry, but also meant to protect my pride. A month in the van loosened something in me, too, the courage to stop lying. Late one evening, warmed by the glow of the campfire and the gentle encouragement of a woman named Rosa who insisted I speak, I called my grandmother. My voice trembled as I told her everything, the rejection, the van, the nights of cold. She was silent for a few heartbeats, and then she began to cry. Her tears were not the patronizing kind I had braced for. They were fierce and hot and full of anger. How could they? She whispered, and each word was like a small hammer hitting the facade my parents had built. The next day she arrived like a small, tanned force of nature, accompanied by a calm man in a tidy suit, her lawyer. I watched from a distance as they approached my parents' house. I had planned to wait in the van, to let her handle it, but when my mother lunged and grabbed my phone and my father slammed the door on me, something in me curled around old, bruised parts. My grandmother did not hesitate. She knocked until the hinges complained. She walked in, took my hand, and announced, plain as daylight, that my place was with her. She read a new will aloud that afternoon, her voice steady and certain. Everything I own will be for him. The confrontation that followed was volcanic in small ways. My parents' sputtered denials, my father's attempt at threats, my mother's pleading tears. My grandmother, who had once loved them as fiercely as I loved her, turned and said things I had never heard her say before, blunt truths, finalities, a refusal to be manipulated. She called them selfish and foolish and worse. She might have been the gentlest woman in the family, but she was not gentle with injustice. After that day, my life shifted again. My grandmother's house was warm and cluttered with books and old photographs. There were linens that smelled like lavender and a kitchen always ready to offer a bowl of soup. I moved in with her, slowly at first, learning to accept care as an act of love rather than pity. She insisted I enroll in the local community college she favored, a modest place where I could study foundation courses in art and learn techniques without the pressure of prestige. She sat with me as I filled out forms, her hand warm on mine. She encouraged me to apply for small exhibitions and to sell sketches at a weekend market. She paid for the paints and the canvases and, more importantly, taught me how to believe I deserved to make my own choices. My parents called once, twice, then their numbers went silent. They had expected me to return, to take their plan and wear it, but I did not. My grandmother took legal steps, quietly and efficiently, to protect her assets. She told them, in no uncertain terms, that their treatment of me had consequences. She would no longer be a bank for cruelty. It felt strange and right to see the roles reversed, the child protected by the elder wielding her resources to defend a grandson's future. Months passed. The campsite friends became part of my life in new ways, visitors on weekends, fellow artists in the small shows I began to enter. I worked odd jobs, delivering paintings, doing portrait sessions in the park, helping neighbors fix gutters, anything to contribute. The fear that had once gnawed beneath my ribs loosened. I learned to sleep without the constant hum of anxiety, to stare at a blank canvas and trust that something honest would come. Most nights, my grandmother and I sat on her sagging sofa and talked. She told me stories about her own youth, about choices made and roads not taken. She used to tuck stray hairs behind my ear and say, "You are not their mirror." Over time, those words translated into a life I had been too afraid to imagine when my parents' plans had been the only map I knew. There is no fairy tale closure to my story. My parents remain estranged. The hurt between us is real and raw, but in losing their approval, I found a different kind of home, one built on care, small rebellions, and ink-stained fingers. I enrolled in community college, took night classes in life drawing, and began a portfolio that, for the first time, belonged to me. The van sits parked in my grandmother's garage, its dents and rust a memorial to a year that taught me how to listen to my own voice. Perhaps the most important thing I learned is this: people who try to define you by their shame and hopes are not always right. And freedom, even when it arrives uninvited and terrifying, can be the kindest teacher. My life is still messy. I'm still figuring out rent and deadlines and what it means to be an artist rather than a poster of someone else's success. But when I look at my hands now, smeared with paint, I feel less like a product and more like a person. And that, after so many years of being polished for other people's glory, feels like finally coming home. When my grandmother declared that she would be cutting my parents off from her inheritance, the room fell into stunned silence. Her voice, usually soft and kind, carried a steel edge I had never heard before. My parents stared at her, their faces draining of color as her words sank in. "For your cruelty," she said firmly, For your shameful behavior toward your own child, you will not receive a single penny of my estate, not my house, not my land, not even a teacup. You've disgraced the meaning of family." It was as if the air had been sucked out of the room. My father, once so loud and controlling, could barely meet her eyes. My mother tried to protest, her voice trembling. "Mom, please, you don't understand, he's been ungrateful. Enough," my grandmother snapped, slamming her cane against the floor. "Ungrateful? You threw your own son out like trash. You humiliated him. You robbed him of his childhood and then dared to call it love." For a long moment, no one spoke. My grandmother's lawyer stood silently in the corner, taking notes, while my parents sat frozen. To them, her inheritance wasn't just money, it was everything. It was their safety net, their reputation, the very foundation of their carefully constructed image. My father had built his life around the assumption that, one day, he would inherit her wealth. My mother had spent years maintaining appearances, lavish parties, branded clothes, expensive cars, all funded by my grandmother's generosity. And now, with a single declaration, that illusion had collapsed. In the days that followed, my parents' desperation became evident. They began calling me, first my father, then my mother. Their voices were suddenly soft, trembling, unfamiliar. "Son," my father began in his first voicemail, "we were wrong. I was wrong. I shouldn't have said those things. Come home. Let's talk. We can fix this." Then came my mother's messages, each one more dramatic than the last. "Sweetheart, please, I can't sleep knowing you're out there. We love you. We just want you home. Things will be different now." But I could hear it in their tone, the fear, not remorse. They weren't sorry because they loved me. They were sorry because they had lost their grip on control and money. Their sudden affection was an act, a desperate performance to regain access to what they had thrown away. When I didn't respond, their messages turned frantic, then manipulative. "You're breaking your mother's heart," my father texted. "Your grandmother's poisoning you against us. You'll regret this." I remember sitting at my grandmother's kitchen table, showing her the texts. She adjusted her glasses and read them slowly, her face unreadable. Then she looked up and said, "You see, my dear, some people only love you when you serve their needs. That's not love, it's ownership." Her words hit me deeply. For the first time, I saw my parents clearly. Every sacrifice they claimed to make for me had been a transaction, every compliment, a currency to control me. Even so, I found myself wrestling with guilt. Was I being too harsh? Should I give them another chance? My grandmother noticed my silence and placed her wrinkled hand over mine. "You have every right to protect your peace," she said gently. "Forgiveness doesn't always mean letting people back into your life." She then shifted the conversation, asking me about my plans. "What do you want to do next, child? What do you dream of?" I hesitated, unsure how to answer. No one had ever asked me that question before. I want to study art," I admitted quietly. A small smile spread across her face. "Then that's exactly what you'll do. There's a wonderful community college nearby with an art program. We'll enroll you there, and this time, you'll live for yourself, not for them." She made the arrangements within days, paperwork, fees, supplies. She even turned the attic into a small studio for me, sunlight streaming through the skylight. It felt like stepping into a new world. But peace never lasts long when you have toxic people in your life. 2 days ago, my mother texted me again. This time, her message was laced with panic. "Your father's very sick," she wrote. "He refuses to go to the hospital unless you come see him. Please, he just wants to see you one last time." When I showed the message to my grandmother, her brow furrowed. "I don't trust this," she said. "It smells of deceit." Still, she agreed we should verify. "If they're lying, I'll handle it," she said firmly, calling her lawyer to accompany her. "If they're telling the truth, we'll see for ourselves." The next morning, we drove to my parents' house. My grandmother parked down the street, insisting she would wait for my signal before approaching. I stepped out, nerves tightening in my chest, and rang the doorbell. My mother opened the door, her eyes puffy, her expression oddly forced. "Come in, sweetheart," she said sweetly. "He's upstairs, waiting for you." I stepped inside, and that's when everything shifted. She snatched my phone from my hand, her expression twisting. "You're not leaving until you talk to us properly," she said. Before I could react, my father appeared and locked the door behind me. "You've turned your grandmother against us," he barked. "You'll fix this right now." They shoved me into a room and bolted the door. I could hear them arguing in the hallway, blaming me, blaming her, blaming each other. My heart pounded as I tried to open the window, but it was sealed. I shouted, hoping my grandmother would hear me, but the house was too thick with silence. After a few minutes that felt like hours, I heard the familiar sound of her car door slam, followed by her unmistakable voice outside. "Open this door," she demanded, her tone sharp as thunder. My parents went quiet. Then, reluctantly, I heard the latch turn. My grandmother stormed in, her lawyer right behind her. She saw me, pale and shaken, and her expression hardened with fury. "What kind of parents lock their child in a room?" she shouted. "Have you lost all sense of decency?" My father tried to defend himself, stammering, "Mom, we just wanted to talk." "Talk?" She cut him off. "By force? You don't talk to your son. You terrorize him. I should have known you'd stoop this low." She turned to the lawyer. "You're my witness," she said. "I want restraining orders filed immediately." My parents tried to plead with her, but she wouldn't listen. She took me by the hand, led me out of that house, and didn't look back once. As we drove away, I looked at her, small, fierce, her hands gripping the wheel tightly, and felt something I hadn't felt in a long time: safety. That night, she sat beside me on the porch as the sun dipped below the trees. "You did nothing wrong," she told me softly. "You were born to live your own life, not to be their puppet. I'll protect you until my last breath." Tears filled my eyes as I whispered, "I don't know how to thank you." She smiled. "You don't have to. Just live. That will be enough." Now, as I look ahead, I've made my choice. I'm cutting my parents out of my life for good. Their love was conditional. Hers is pure. I will stay by her side and take care of her as she has taken care of me. She is the only family I truly have, a rare, precious gem in a world that once tried to break me.